Carl Jung's final warning to empaths was nothing short of terrifying. They are feeding on your light, and you don't even realize it's happening. In his private notes, Jung described a psychological phenomenon so disturbing that he hesitated to release it to the world. He discovered that empaths, those with extraordinary emotional sensitivity, were being systematically drained by what I call unconscious energy parasites. And here's the horrifying part. They weren't obvious predators. No, they were often charming, fragile, wounded souls who appeared to desperately need healing. But Jung uncovered something chilling. These people had unconsciously learned to survive by consuming the spiritual energy of others, especially empaths, whose light burned the brightest. The most dangerous part? The feeding process is invisible. It hides behind emotional manipulation disguised as connection, behind trauma bonds mistaken for love, and behind compassion twisted into a weapon against the empath. Jung realized that empaths weren't just attracting difficult people. They were being hunted, targeted by those whose inner flame had gone out, and who could only survive by feeding on the light of others. So tonight, we descend into the shadow realm of human psychology to expose these invisible predators, to reveal their feeding mechanisms before they strike, and to uncover Jung's forbidden method of transforming yourself from prey into sovereign without losing the gift that makes you extraordinary. Because here's what Jung discovered that modern psychology still refuses to acknowledge. Empaths aren't born broken. They are forged. Forged in childhood trauma, molded into perfect hosts for emotional parasites. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But in his clinical work, he found a darker truth. When an empath meets an energy parasite, only one person is transformed, and it's never the parasite. Think about it. From an evolutionary standpoint, empaths developed their supernatural sensitivity as a survival tool. The child who could read every micro-expression, anticipate every mood shift, and absorb every unspoken emotion, that was the child who survived the chaos. But here lies the cruel irony. The very survival mechanism that saved you in childhood now paints a target on your back in adulthood. It makes you a beacon for predators who've learned to weaponize your gift against you. Modern research backs this up. Dr. Judith Orloff's findings confirm what Jung saw decades ago. Empaths' mirror neurons fire more intensely than average. Your brain literally absorbs the emotions of others as if they were your own. And here's the part most therapists still miss. Some people exploit this. They don't just trigger your empathy by accident. They strategically activate it. They've unconsciously mastered emotional manipulation that feels like connection, trauma bonds that masquerade as deep love, energy extraction that you mistake for intimacy. And the most devastating part? Jung called it the shadow projection reversal. The parasite doesn't just take your light, they convince you that giving it away is your purpose. He observed this pattern again and again. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But in the case of empaths and parasites, the process flips. The predator projects their emptiness onto the empath, making them believe that exhaustion equals love, that depletion equals devotion, that being drained is somehow normal. Think about the last time you left someone's presence completely drained. Your body probably screamed at you. Sudden fatigue, emotional overwhelm, tension, brain fog. But instead of listening, you told yourself you were too sensitive or overthinking. That's exactly what the parasite needed you to believe. Jung called it the gaslight of the unconscious, when someone's shadow convinces your consciousness that your intuition is the problem. And now, here's how the feeding process really works. And this is where Jung's observations become terrifying in their precision. Stage 1. Light recognition. Energy parasites are drawn to empaths like moths to a flame. They can sense your emotional openness from across a room. Jung noted that narcissistic personalities have an uncanny ability to spot empaths instantly. They recognize the glow of someone who gives more than they take, who feels more deeply than most, who carries the weight of emotional responsibility for others. Stage 2. The wound display. The parasite doesn't begin with demands. They begin with pain. They open up about their trauma, their struggles, their broken past. They mirror your depth while concealing their emptiness. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But energy parasites twist this truth. They don't become themselves. They become whoever you need them to be. Stage 3. Empathy activation. Once your compassion is hooked, the extraction begins. They create crisis after crisis that demands your emotional labor. They unload their trauma without reciprocity. They make you feel special for understanding them in ways no one else could. Jung observed that empaths often mistake being needed for being loved, and that confusion is where the siphoning begins. Stage 4. Depletion normalization. This is the most insidious stage. The parasite convinces you that feeling drained is evidence of a deep connection, that exhaustion equals love, that your emotional overwhelm is just part of being a highly sensitive person, rather than proof that you are being systematically depleted. And here's where Jung's understanding becomes revolutionary. He didn't see this as simple interpersonal dysfunction. He recognized it as an archetypal pattern, what I call the wounded healer meets the shadow devourer. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." For empaths, this means facing a brutal truth. Your compassion can be weaponized. Your gift can become your prison, and your light can be consumed if you don't learn to guard it. Because in Jungian psychology, every archetype has a shadow. The empath's shadow isn't cruelty. It's the unconscious need to be needed. The addiction to fixing others because being useful feels safer than being truly seen. It's the terror of abandonment so deep that you'll accept emotional vampirism rather than risk being alone. Understand this. Energy parasites are not mustache-twirling villains plotting your destruction. They are unconscious beings driven by what Jung called the shadow's hunger for wholeness. They sense in you what they've exiled in themselves, the capacity for genuine feeling, authentic connection, and emotional depth. But instead of doing the inner work to reclaim these qualities, they've learned to steal them from others. They feed on your emotional energy because they've cut themselves off from their own. They bask in your light because their own flame has gone out. This creates what I call the psychological vampire effect. The more energy you give, the more they need. The more you try to heal them, the more broken they become. The more light you share, the darker their shadow grows. Not because they are inherently evil, but because they are psychologically incomplete. They have disowned their capacity for genuine emotion, and so they must constantly consume it from external sources. Like someone born without a stomach, forever eating, yet never satisfied. And this leads to what I call the empath's impossible choice. You feel their pain. You feel their emptiness. You feel their desperate hunger for the light you carry. Your compassionate nature wants to help, to heal, to save them from their darkness. But Jung discovered something that changes everything. You cannot heal someone by letting them feed on your essence. You cannot love someone back to wholeness by allowing them to drain your light. You cannot save someone who is unconsciously committed to staying lost. So what does this look like in the real world? The romantic energy vampire. Sarah met David at a spiritual retreat. He seemed deep, sensitive, wounded in a way that awakened her healing nature. He shared his childhood trauma, his battles with depression, his endless search for meaning. Sarah felt chosen, special, like she was the one who truly understood him. But within months, she noticed she was always exhausted. David would call during work hours with emotional crises. He would trauma dump for hours, never asking about her day. And when she tried to share her struggles, he either minimized them or twisted them into another reflection of his pain. It wasn't until Sarah applied Jung's principles that she finally saw the truth. David wasn't seeking healing. He was seeking supply. Her empathy had become his drug, her emotional labor, his crutch. When Sarah began setting boundaries, David's mask slipped. Suddenly, she was cold, uncaring. Not the person he thought she was. But the truth was simple. Sarah had stopped being his feeding source. And without her light, David's unconscious began searching for a new host, the family energy parasite. Michael's mother had always been emotionally intense. She called with crisis after crisis, making him feel responsible for her well-being. If he didn't answer immediately, she accused him of abandonment. If he tried to set boundaries, she threatened suicide. Jung would have recognized this instantly. The devouring mother archetype, a parent who unconsciously feeds on her child's life force instead of nurturing it. Michael's empathy had been weaponized against him since childhood, but when he finally learned about energy parasitism, he saw the truth. His exhaustion wasn't proof he was a bad son. It was proof he was being systematically drained by someone who had never learned to regulate her own emotions. Setting boundaries with his mother didn't mean betrayal. It meant self-preservation, the workplace emotional vampire. Lisa worked with a colleague who was always in crisis. They monopolized meetings with personal drama, sought her out for endless venting sessions, and turned their inability to function into everyone else's emergency. What made this especially insidious was how they framed it. They positioned themselves as sensitive, the soulful one in a cold corporate world. Lisa's natural empathy made her feel obligated to provide unlimited support. Jung would have called this projection. The colleague was unconsciously making their emotional chaos everyone else's responsibility, while casting themselves as the victim of an unfeeling system. But here's where Jung's warning becomes urgent. The longer you allow energy parasites to feed on your light, the more you begin to merge with their shadow. You start to believe the projection that you exist to serve the emotional needs of others. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." For empaths, this means confronting a brutal reality. Your compulsion to heal others often comes from your own unhealed wounds. The shadow side of empathy is the unconscious belief that you don't matter unless you're useful. Love must be earned through service. Your value lies in your ability to absorb and process other people's pain. This belief system makes you the perfect host for energy parasites. You give endless emotional labor while convincing yourself it's love. You deplete your resources while calling it compassion. You sacrifice your well-being while believing it's spiritual growth. But Jung discovered something that changes everything. Your light was never meant to be consumed by others. It was meant to illuminate your own path toward wholeness. When you give your energy away without limits, you're not being loving. You're avoiding the terrifying task of learning to love yourself. When you obsessively try to heal others, you're often running from your own healing. The energy parasite becomes your enabler in spiritual bypassing. They give you someone to save, so you don't have to save yourself. They provide endless drama, so you don't have to face your own shadows. They offer you the role of martyr, so you never have to step into the role of sovereign. And this is where Jung's framework offers a way forward, a way to protect your light without hardening your heart. I call it the light method. L. Learn to discern energy signatures. Jung emphasized the importance of what he called feeling tone complexes. Every person carries an energetic signature, and your empathic abilities can read it if you know how to listen. Here's the difference. With parasites, you leave feeling drained, anxious, confused, hijacked. With healthy people, you leave feeling clear, energized, peaceful, inspired. Start documenting this. Notice how you feel before, during, and after every interaction. Your body is a sophisticated radar system. Trust it. I. Integrate your shadow. Jung believed shadow integration was essential for psychological health. For empaths, this means owning the hidden parts of yourself, the need to be needed, the fear of abandonment, the belief that love must be earned through service. Ask yourself, what do I get out of being needed by broken people? How does rescuing others help me avoid rescuing myself? What childhood wound am I really trying to heal through others? The goal isn't to eliminate these tendencies. It's to make them conscious so they no longer unconsciously drive your relationships. G. Guard your sacred energy. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakens." Protecting your energy is not selfish. It is spiritual responsibility. It means saying no to emotional labor that depletes you. It means refusing to carry other people's unprocessed shadows. It means choosing relationships that nourish rather than drain. Your energy is finite. It is sacred. Every moment you spend processing someone else's darkness is a moment stolen from the growth of your own light. H. Honor your authentic nature. Energy parasites are magnetically drawn to empaths who dim their light to make others comfortable. The more you suppress your gifts, deny your intuition, or minimize your sensitivity, the more you become a target for those who want to devour what you've hidden. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, rather than who others need you to be. For empaths, this means claiming your sensitivity as strength, trusting your intuition as wisdom, and wielding your gift consciously, not unconsciously. Transform trauma into wisdom. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That includes accepting this. You were targeted by energy parasites not because you are weak, but because you carry something precious, something unconscious people want to consume. Your empathic abilities were forged in trauma as a survival mechanism. Now they must evolve into a conscious choice. You can feel others' emotions without absorbing them. You can offer compassion without self-sacrifice. You can help without hollowing yourself. And when you apply Jung's principles to relationships, everything shifts. Energy parasites stop circling your life. Instead, you begin attracting conscious beings who can match your emotional depth without depleting your resources. But Jung left us a warning. During this transition, parasites will escalate. They'll sense your light slipping from their grasp and they'll unleash what I call the extinction burst of the shadow. They'll create bigger crises. They'll threaten suicide. They'll accuse you of being cold, selfish, unrecognizable. They'll try to guilt you back into servitude by reminding you of their trauma, their pain, their endless need for your support. This escalation feels like cruelty on your part, but it's not. It's withdrawal. It's their addiction thrashing against the loss of its drug. Remember, their desperation is not proof of your lack of compassion. It is proof that your boundaries are working. You are not responsible for managing the emotions of someone who can no longer use you as an emotional dumping ground. Healthy people will respect your boundaries. They will celebrate your growth. They will give back the same emotional energy you invest. But here's the most important truth. You must become the kind of person you wish to attract. If you want conscious relationships, you must cultivate consciousness in yourself. If you want reciprocity, you must learn to receive, not just give. If you want authentic love, you must show up authentically, not perform the role others demand. Jung understood that this battle for your light is not just psychological, it is spiritual. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But energy parasites have a vested interest in keeping you small, depleted, and blind to your own power. When you begin protecting your energy, when you begin setting boundaries, you are not simply changing relationships. You are entering what I call the war for your soul. This is not metaphor. Your essence, your life force, your very light is at stake, and parasites will use every weapon they have to keep feeding. Guilt. After everything I've been through, you're going to abandon me? Shame. I thought you were more compassionate than this. Fear. You're selfish. You'll end up alone. False urgency. I need you right now more than ever. Identity attacks. This isn't who you really are. But Jung gave us the ultimate weapon against every tactic, consciousness. Because when you can name the manipulation, when you can see it clearly, it loses its power over you. The truth is, every time you say no to energy vampirism, you're saying yes to your own evolution. Every boundary you set is a vote for your authentic self. Every time you refuse to dim your light for someone else's comfort, you're choosing spiritual growth over spiritual stagnation. This doesn't mean you become cold or uncaring. It means you become discerning. You begin to see the difference between genuine compassion and codependent caretaking. You learn how to help others without harming yourself. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. When an empath awakens to their true power, they become dangerous to systems built on unconsciousness. An empath who can no longer be manipulated, drained, or controlled threatens every relationship dynamic rooted in inequality. You become a mirror, reflecting back the unconsciousness others try to avoid. You become a boundary, forcing people to take responsibility for their own emotional states. The awakened empath doesn't just protect their light, they become a beacon, showing others how to ignite their own flame. You stop being a source to be consumed and instead become a catalyst for growth. But this transformation demands something most empaths fear. You must be willing to be disliked by unconscious people. You must be willing to lose relationships built on your depletion. You must be willing to stand alone rather than sacrifice yourself for false connection. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When you become an awakened empath, you can only maintain relationships with people committed to their own growth. Everyone else will fall away. And this isn't failure, it's discernment. It isn't loss, it's liberation. It isn't loneliness, it's sovereignty. Comment below if you've ever been called selfish for setting boundaries with energy vampires. Because the truth is this, your energy is sacred. You'll discover you'd rather have one authentic connection than a dozen draining relationships. You'll realize that the quality of presence matters more than the quantity of people. You'll understand that your light is far too precious to be consumed by those who refuse to do their own inner work. Jung identified 3 levels of empath development. Understanding where you are will help you move toward true energetic sovereignty. Level 1. The unconscious empath. You feel everything but understand nothing. You absorb others' emotions without realizing it. You're constantly drained, blaming yourself for being too sensitive. You attract energy parasites because you haven't yet learned to protect your gifts. At this stage, empathy controls you instead of you controlling it. You're like a radio that picks up every frequency but can't tune into specific stations. The solution? Emotional boundaries and the ability to separate your feelings from others. Level 2. The conscious empath. You've begun to recognize your empathic abilities and use them intentionally. You can feel others' emotions without automatically absorbing them. You've learned basic energy protection, and you can hold some boundaries with parasites. Here you begin to see the line between empathy and codependency. You can offer compassion without depletion, but guilt still haunts you when you set boundaries, and sometimes you slip back. Level 3. The sovereign empath. You've integrated your shadow and reclaimed your gifts as sacred abilities, not burdens. You can feel deeply without losing yourself. You attract conscious people who meet you with reciprocity. Here, empathy transforms into discernment. You can sense the difference between authentic emotions and performed emotions. You can offer healing presence without absorbing others' wounds as your own. The journey from level 1 to level 3 requires what I call the courage to disappoint. You must be willing to disappoint energy parasites who demand unlimited access to your light. You must be willing to disappoint family members who've relied on you as their emotional regulator. You must be willing to disappoint society's belief that empaths should always be available for others' healing. But here is Jung's final warning. Once you begin protecting your light, you cannot go back to unconscious empathy. Once you see the feeding patterns, you cannot unsee them. And once you taste energetic sovereignty, you can never again return to emotional slavery. This knowledge will cost you relationships. It will challenge your identity. It will force you to confront the parts of yourself that would rather be needed than respected, useful than authentic, depleted than alone. Some of you will twist this truth into walls instead of boundaries. You'll mistake cynicism for discernment. You'll confuse emotional unavailability with spiritual strength. Don't make that mistake. The goal isn't to stop feeling. The goal isn't to stop caring. The goal is to feel and care consciously, with intention, not compulsion, with wisdom, not unconscious sacrifice. Jung's final warning was this: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming who you are demands letting go of who you think you should be for everyone else's comfort. Your light is not a resource to be consumed. It is a presence to be embodied. Your empathy is not a service to be exploited. It is a sacred gift to be shared with awareness. The world doesn't need more depleted healers. It needs awakened empaths, those who know the difference between love and enabling, between compassion and codependency, between service and self-sacrifice. If people began treating you differently the moment you stopped being their emotional dumping ground, comment, "They sensed my awakening before I announced it." Remember Jung's terrifying discovery. The ones feeding on your light were never monsters. They were unconscious beings, surviving the only way they knew, consuming others instead of kindling their own flame. And yet Jung left us with a revelation. The greatest and most important problems of life are never solved. They are only outgrown. You cannot heal the energy parasites by letting them drain you. You can only outgrow your need to be needed by them. Because here's the paradox. When you protect your light, you don't diminish it. You amplify it. When you stop letting others feed on your essence, you reclaim that energy for your own growth, your own healing, your own evolution. The empath who guards their gifts does not become cold. They become discerning. They learn to offer their light only to those who can hold it with reverence, those who reflect it back rather than consume it. Jung's final warning wasn't only about defense. It was about claiming your birthright, your sovereignty, the choice to direct your gifts with consciousness instead of compulsion. Your sensitivity is not a curse. It is a superpower. Your empathy is not weakness. It is strength. Your light is not fuel for others' darkness. It is illumination for your path to wholeness. The parasites Jung warned of can only feed on unconscious empaths. But when you awaken, when you learn to protect your essence without dimming it, to share without depletion, you become untouchable. That is ultimate protection, not walls that shut everyone out, but consciousness that lets only love in. Master this, and you will never again confuse being drained with being loved, being needed with being valued, or being depleted with being devoted. Jung's warning was clear. They are feeding on your light, but his promise was even clearer. You have the power to stop them. And if you see yourself in these words, remember, you are not alone. Thousands of empaths are awakening right now, reclaiming their power, stepping into sovereignty. So tell me in the comments, what boundary are you ready to set to protect your light? Because your story might be the spark that ignites someone else's awakening. If you're ready to go deeper into Jung's psychology and how shadow integration reshapes your drive and ambition, watch my next video, Why You Have No Motivation Left After Facing Your Shadow. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.